Welcome, everybody, back to House General and Housing. It is still Thursday, January 15th. Month is half over, if you can believe it, of 2026. And where we are now is we're taking up the question of a proposal to make a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee with respect to what goes into the Budget Adjustment Act. And there are certain sources of funds in the BAA, and it's up to the Appropriations Committee to determine what to do, how to use that money. And one of the major issues that the state is facing because of the federal funding scheme is a kind of slow, we've experienced a slow but significant decline in the number of Section 8 vouchers, which support the Section 8 voucher makes up the difference between the ability of a tenant to pay and what the market rate is. And that the number of such vouchers have been in decline. As Chris Donnelly will probably explain, all of our local housing authorities, such as the Champlain Housing Trust, for example, or Downstreet, Rural Edge, et cetera, that they rely on knowing that their projects will be financially supported by these Section 8 vouchers. So what you have in front of you, I passed out, is a draft letter with two House appropriations. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to hear testimony. We're going to hear testimony from Kathleen Burke, Executive Director of VSHA, from two directors of local housing authorities, and from Chris Connolly of Champlain Housing Trust. I'd also like to recognize that one august member of the committee, Tiff Bloomley of the Appropriations Committee, is here in the room with us. And if we go too far astray, she can whip us with a wet noodle as we need to. So the idea, what I would like us to do is I'd like all of you to ask whatever questions you desire of the witnesses, and then I'd like to bring it to you for determination as to whether or not we should send this letter to the Appropriations Committee. It's not our decision. It's their decision as to whether to appropriate. So with that, Kathleen, take it away.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Kathleen Burke. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Housing Authority, and I'm pleased to be invited back once again today to talk to you about this very important issue. My testimony today requests the support of this committee through the Budget Adjustment Act to establish a $5 million voucher contingency fund to prevent the involuntary termination of households from public housing authority housing choice voucher programs due to federal funding shortfalls. This request builds upon my testimony and materials provided to the House Committee on General and Housing on January 8th, as well as several other legislative committees over the past several months. Why this is necessary now. Federal housing voucher funding is chronically underfunded and unpredictable, placing Vermont PHAs at immediate risk of losing vouchers and displacing currently housed families.
PHA is a
Public Housing Authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Without state assistance in calendar year 2026, public housing authorities will likely be forced to terminate assistance to comply with federal spending caps. Vermont will lose hundreds of vouchers and millions of federal funds. The state will face higher downward stream costs tied to homelessness and housing instability. The proposed voucher contingency fund is a targeted one-time and fiscally responsible tool that allows Vermont to ensure public housing authorities are in a better position this year and next year, prevent avoidable housing instability, protects federal rental assistance already in use, avoids greater downstream costs associated with homelessness and displacement, and supports the creation of affordable housing development here in Vermont. Considerations for this committee. Public housing authorities in calendar year 2025 shortfall are expected to remain in a shortfall situation in calendar year 2026, absent intervention. Final calendar year 2026 allocations are unknown until Congress enacts a full year appropriations bill. Projected federal losses as we understand them today. The House bill projects Vermont to lose 600 vouchers as a part of the 2026 appropriations bill. The Senate bill projects Vermont to lose an additional 300 vouchers as part of the 2026 appropriations bill.
Yes, the Senate is at an additional 300 to the 600, making it 900, or the Senate would be.
You have two separate bills. You have the House version and you have the Senate version,
Correct.
which are very different from one another. And so one is 600, one is
Okay.
300.
And can you remind me roughly how many individuals that would be?
How many what?
Individuals that could be?
So that would be 1,800 individuals under the House bill approximately, and 600 under the Senate bill.
Thank you. You said 1,800 people? For the,
1,200, I'm
1,200.
sorry, under the House bill, assuming the average of two
Yeah.
person per household, which is the metric. So the estimated impact, financial impact to Vermont is somewhere between 3.6 million and 7.2 million in annual federal funding actions.
2.6 to what?
3.6 to 7.2 million. House bill approximately 3.6 million in loss. The Senate bill, I'm sorry, the reverse.
Yeah.
The House bill approximately 7.2, the Senate bill approximately 6. Public Housing Authority reserves previously used to absorb shortfalls are exhausted. Our request today is to support the creation of a voucher contingency fund through the BAA process. The amount requested is $5 million in one-time funding to be administered by the Agency of Administration, accessed by Vermont Public Housing Authorities as needed, used to offset federal housing voucher funding shortfalls that would otherwise result in voucher terminations. Compliance would be subject to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and Public Housing Authority requirements. If HUD approvals are not provided and terminations are unavoidable, I would recommend that funds may be used for this purpose. Reversion. Any unused funds would eventually revert back to the general fund. This targeted one-time contingency fund provides a necessary safeguard during federal uncertainty, protecting Vermont families, preserving federal rental assistance, and avoiding higher state costs. We respectfully request that you support funding for a $5 million voucher contingency fund and the Budget Adjustment Act.
Please.
why the BAA?
Because it's the fastest path forward, and the sooner we're able to create a contingency fund, the sooner we're able to protect Vermont residents and protect the loss of additional vouchers to the program.
Is it, just so I make sure that I understand it correctly, the amount of money that HUD gives us for Section 8 vouchers in a given calendar year is set on the basis of how many activate vouchers there was in the prior year.
That's correct.
So what we're trying to do with this one-time strategic intervention is to increase the number of vouchers or slow the decrease in the number of vouchers in this calendar year as much as possible in order to increase whatever our allocation is in subsequent calendar years. In other words, they decide, HUD decides in the spring how much to give us by looking at the last year. By having more vouchers this year, we'll have more money in future years, and that's what the system does, correct?
That is correct.
And then the BAA, the idea of the BAA is the earlier the money is available, the more vouchers we can save this year, and thus the more that we'll have in future years. Yes, Tom. And Joe, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did first.
Go for it.
Okay. Remembering some testimony from last year, indicating that there were people, substantial number of people eligible for vouchers that were unable to use them because they could not find a suitable apartment.
That's correct.
How does the government count those? Are those active vouchers, or they don't get used because there's not housing enough? They subtract that from what the.
They essentially do. The way that the funding formula
Thank you.
works essentially very simply is our allocation or our budget for next year is based on our spending this year.
Okay, actual spend.
Actual spend,
Authorized.
dollars out the door, money spent.
So if it's not rented, it doesn't count.
It doesn't.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. May I ask a question?
Please, Debbie, and then we'll get to the others. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure, like, the people that have Section 8 now, like they might have been getting it for the last 9 years, Section 8 vouchers, do they continue, or are they going to fade away unless we do something?
They will fade away unless something is done.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question? I just saw,
I do. I've got a just kind of how the system operates. I have like an idea of how I think it does, but I'm not positive.
Sure.
So for the vouchers, is the voucher in money decided at each voucher's worth X? And if you spend more or less, that's going to decide if you can use all your vouchers?
It's the funding formula for purposes of renewal for the next year is based on the aggregate of everything that a public housing authority spent the prior year. So for example, we serve approximately 3,500 families in our Housing Choice Voucher program. Each one of those vouchers has their own unique cost associated with it, right? The renewal formula for the next year takes a look back at the prior year and determines, it's called re-benchmarking. What did your housing authority spend the prior calendar year on total voucher costs without regard to the number of families served? Okay, so our budget last year was $35 million. This is where things get tricky. We're authorized to serve up to approximately 4,300 households. However, that $35 million does not support 4,300 households in practice, because as Representative Mohali has used the analogy of the funnel, and I think it's a very good one. Over time, there's been an erosion of the maximum amount of funds that public housing authorities are receiving to run their program. So with the $35 million that we received last year, we were able to serve approximately 3,500 families. On average, yes. About 3,500 families, although we're authorized to serve 4,300 families. And so now if we don't stop this erosion, the way that we stop the erosion is by investing in vouchers. So those expenses are realized as part of our budget this year, right? If those expenses are realized as part of our budget this year, then they are eligible for renewal on the federal dime next year.
But just as a technical matter, to follow on your question, and then I'll bring it back to you. Just as a technical matter, forget about the whole federal funding problem. The voucher, the amount of the voucher is set at the difference between the earning power of a given family and what you know the market rate is for that unit,
That's
correct?
exactly correct.
And it's set annually
It's
by you guys. It's not set by the tenant, it's set
It's
by
set
you
by
guys.
us. It's set by the Vermont State Housing Authority and local public.
Okay,
housing
Joe,
authorities.
back to you.
Maybe I'm not explaining it well. When you get the vouchers, the federal government has a dollar amount tied to every voucher, I'm guessing. Basically, they're all worth $700. If you spend 900 on them, you can only fulfill X number of vouchers now.
Mhm.
Well,
So are we spending all of our money?
We're spending all
Of
of our
just,
money.
we can't fulfill all the vouchers because
No.
we have a higher subsidy level.
No. So
I got one person shaking their head, yes.
we're spending all of our money. And in fact, we didn't have enough money last year to support all of our vouchers in use.
In use.
what, it's,
And
HUD does not tell us how much to spend on a voucher.
I know, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, when the vouchers come to you, there is a formula for them that is 700 vouchers at $600 a piece. That's the math for how much money you've got. You can use 700 vouchers. You can have money left over and use all your vouchers. But if you subsidize more, you can fulfill less than their equation the equation they're sending you, not the one that you use, the one they send you. Would that be correct?
That is correct. However, HUD, as part of their re-benchmarking process, which is the process that they go through to determine a public housing authority's renewal eligibility for the next year, is they analyzed what your expenses were for your total voucher program. And then they typically would inflate that by a percentage because housing costs increase over time. Subsidy costs increase over time. The problem with the funding formula is twofold. The inflation factor that HUD has applied to your prior year's expense is lower than what our actual inflationary increases are for our subsidy program, for our voucher program. And HUD will go through that re-benchmarking process. And they'll say, okay, we only have X amount of money to allocate to all public housing authorities around the country. So Vermont State Housing Authority, we're going to give you 95% of what you need to support your program because that's all the money that we have. And so when they give us 95%, that's a reduction. They're not fully funding our voucher program, right? And the way that public housing authorities have to manage that is to take cost-saving measures, which we have done and we will continue to do. We have to take vouchers that are turned in through attrition, families who no longer need them. We take those offline and we shelve them. And if those strategies don't work, then we're in a situation where we have to terminate families that are receiving assistance from the program.
Okay.
Because we can't spend more than what HUD has allocated to our agency for that calendar year.
Okay. Understood that part. How does this one time, I mean, The one time will certain, I mean, it's just one-time money to pay rent. What it is. It's just through a system.
It's one-time money that would go to public housing authorities who need it to stabilize their programs, get those funds in use, right? So they're expensed as part of this year's budget, if you will, and then allows those one-time funds to be eligible for renewal as part of our base allocation the next year.
Okay.
And it protects families in need.
Yeah, I get that part of it. I'm just, it's kind of as a one-time thing. Well, it's really, I mean, we're always going to be falling short of the amount of vouchers. Doesn't matter, we put the money into it this year. 2 years from now, when you say, we fulfilled all of, I don't remember what the number was, sorry, the amount of vouchers you're capable, yeah, you can fulfill.
4,300 if
4,300.
we had the funds to do it.
So you come to them and you say, we fulfilled 4,300 vouchers. You're not going to be able to fulfill 4,300 vouchers because we over subsidize, according to their map calculation, we over subsidize our vouchers. So the following year, we're going to be not be able to fulfill all the vouchers anyway.
Well,
And we'll be in the same,
and
Both,
I would
I get.
argue that doing nothing is going to mean that we're going to lose even more vouchers next year.
In other words,
I know, I'm just saying it's a structural
it is,
problem.
It
It's not a,
absolutely is, it's beyond.
but this solution, this particular injection is very different from the big problem. In other words, I use the funnel analogy because we don't know what Congress in its wisdom is going to dump into the top of the funnel. They could completely screw this program and we'll face huge problems of thousands of people on the street. But we don't know that. But what we do know is that the bottom of the funnel, which is how much we get, if we increase the size of that funnel once, just one time, that's permanent. It means that we will always get a greater share of whatever they choose to give us future years. That's the key. This is just expanding the funnel once so that next year, let's say we're in 2027 or 2028, and next in 2028, whatever amount of money we have, Congress gives, we'll get more of it because of this injection. We'll face, if they cut the program more, we're going to have to face that issue too. But this particular approach is an effort to see if we can increase the size of the bottom of the funnel once. Could we face the same issue again? Sure.
I think, I don't know, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I think in 2 years from now, it's going to be a bigger drop off because we've artificially inflated the top number and we're going to fall right back to where we were. So instead of that 4,300 to where we are, we're going to be saying that we're at, 5,000 to 2,000 now or something like that, because structurally, how much we subsidize.
Do HUD regulations
I'm not saying
define,
it's,
going to this, do HUD regulations define what the purpose of the voucher is? In other words, somewhere in HUD regulations, is there a definition that the voucher amount should be the difference between fair market value rent and the capability of the family, and that's in their regulations?
It absolutely is, yes.
So-
And here in Vermont, we're considered an unpaid state where there's 2 states left in the country. So if you're receiving public assistance, then what you pay toward your rent is the amount that you receive for shelter as part of your grant. So typically families pay 30% of their income toward the rent, and they can pay up to 40% of their income. And over time, that's initially, over time, it's housing choice voucher. If the rent goes up beyond 30% or beyond 40%, they can elect to stay and pay. Right? But the maximum subsidy that we are going to pay is 30% of the families. Or the difference between.
Let's see, who's
the
next?
families.
Ashley's next, okay. Go ahead, Ashley.
I have several questions. The first being, can you just repeat, we're one of two states that does it that way?
Mhm.
What would be the normal? Like, or what is the most,
Tenants pay 30% of their income toward the rent, whatever source of income.
okay. Sorry, that caught me off guard. How many years in a row have we had a shortfall?
This is the first time in my history of leading the agency that we've been in this position. I've been in my position as executive director for 4 years. I previously was the director of our Section 8 housing programs for close to 30 years. Our agency has never been in a shortfall situation.
And is that because there's usually a gap? Like as the general fund or VA fills that gap, or we've just never had a shortfall?
We've never had conversations with the legislature about assisting the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Public housing authorities have worked through those challenges on their own, but typically public housing authorities would have a reserve account, housing assistance payment reserve account that they could fall back on to support increases in housing assistance payments that they weren't expecting.
Okay,
This past year, when Housing and Urban Development funded our budget, they took our reserve account to fund the $35 million that they gave us to run our program. So we don't have a reserve account.
okay, that's helpful. I'm gonna ask a really difficult question. You came in here earlier this week and asked for an additional $45 million of one-time funds.
45 million?
Yep,
No,
what?
those. I think you're thinking of somebody else. Apologies, but I think you're right.
I
Okay,
don't remember that.
I think you're thinking of, River North.
What Evernorth was saying is that in the past, we had used, was it 45 million or 37 million, whatever, and that would multiply it because of the tax credit and tax, other tax programs, but
okay,
I think there have been larger numbers floated.
no, I
Yeah.
guess I'm saying is this is gonna be a very difficult budget year. And it's going to be our responsibility as a legislator to unfortunately pick and choose. And it's how would you like us as an advocate to prioritize where funds are going and how? Because at the end of the day, we as a committee have to say, yes, we support this, no, we don't support this memo. And then our colleagues in appropriations have a really difficult job. But we have to do it in a way that we prioritize and we're able to highlight what's the most important. So I guess my question is, out of all of the monetary asks that you may or may not come back with later, like, what is most important? I think, I absolutely support this. It's just, I guess it's more of like, how would you like us to prioritize these funds?
And thank you for that question. That's a difficult question. Housing stability and preventing housing instability is paramount. It has to be a priority. And I agree, Maslow's hierarchy, right, is under attack. And you've got some very difficult decisions to make. These are all basic needs: food, water, healthcare, housing. Housing is a platform to health. Housing is a platform to better education. Housing is a platform to housing stability, right? So to recap, I think preserving, housing assistance and keeping Vermont families stably housed has to be a priority.
Capital.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you. In your request, you've requested a fund, that we create a fund. This is more for a committee discussion. I have concerns about that because I don't view a fund as a one-time fund, or the creation of a fund, and I'm concerned about that being part of the BAA, but I do understand why we would use the BAA as a vehicle for this one-time appropriation. If we weren't to create a new fund, how would you like us to appropriate this?
Well, my recommendation is to create a fund that would be administered by the Agency of Administration that would, where public housing authorities who need to access the funding for the established purposes would go to that fund, working with the Agency of Administration, that those local housing authorities would be required to comply with the requirements that they have as a business, and any HUD rules and regulation. And that would be, a transaction between the Agency of Administration and that local public housing authority. We're all independent businesses, as we spoke about last week when I was in. And from my lens, a contingency fund would allow the General Assembly to support public housing authorities, make the fund money available should they need it for the prescribed purposes, puts the onus on the public housing authority to work with the administration to obtain these funds. And if the funds aren't needed, we're going through a period of uncertainty. We don't have an appropriations bill yet for 26, right? If the funds aren't needed, then the funds would just revert back to the General Assembly. It seems, from my viewpoint, it seems like the best solution.
But it could be, Tiff, could you enlighten us? I'm under the impression that the Appropriations Committee has to define the device. In other words, the idea is an appropriation to the Agency of Administration, whether it goes in a separate fund or whether it's a straight appropriation, it's up to the
Right.
committee.
I believe after talking with JFO's James Duffy, that that is something that we would just have to work out. He's kind of looking into kind of what the most streamlined, elegant, clear vehicle would be, and we don't know. I don't know that yet.
Other questions before we let Kathleen go and go on to our next? What?
Sadia,
Oh, Saudia.
Sorry about that. Hi, I just have a quick question. Well, one or a couple questions, and I don't know if you can answer. Thank you. I appreciate this proposal. I know it's nuanced. I know it's challenging, but I do understand the systemic barriers into structuring and how the funding comes in, and that if you don't use it, you lose it, and they reduce the amount based off of the incorrect vouchers. I know we lost a lot of vouchers this year. My questions are around the reserve funding and the contingency, whatever this looks like. I have a large group of constituents who are in situations who they have subsidized housing, and their rent is increasing. However, their voucher amount is not, and like some of them work. Most of a large group of folks are folks with developmental disabilities, and so they work limited amounts. But I just wanted to propose the question of do the reserves, are there reserves or contingency funding to cover those gaps so that we're not seeing an increase and an influx in unhoused folks due to a raise and increase if they have a voucher? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Thank you for the question. And this proposal does not propose to offset those gaps as a result of participants needing to pay more because of rents increasing.
Is that, I gotta follow on to that. Do you reset, I mean, what is the process? Let's say I'm a participant. And let's say the difference between my ability to pay, however it's defined, and the amount of the fair market rent. Let's say it's $500. Okay, and then the next year, it's not $500. It's 550. Does my voucher go, do you increase the value of my voucher? And if so, when do you do it?
Sure. So public housing authorities are required to look at what we call our voucher payment standards on an annual basis. The voucher payment standard is the value that a subsidy has, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom subsidy has, the maximum rent that we will pay in any particular county. So the voucher payment standards are set based on a county level by bedroom size. The most subsidy that a single person living in the city of Montpelier will receive would be the 1-bedroom voucher payment standard for a 1-bedroom unit. Okay. If the rent exceeds,
The actual rent.
if the actual rent, the gross rent, including utilities, exceeds the value of that subsidy, what we will pay, the family picks up the cost of that. And I want to bring the nexus back to your question. This is one of the cost saving measures that we've implemented, is that we're purposely are keeping our voucher payment standards lower to stretch the dollar to serve as many families as we possibly can without having to terminate families from the program.
Saudia, does that, I mean, it may be a little unfortunate, but answer your question.
Well, yeah, no, thank you. It answers the question. I just wanted to, and then I'm thinking about who would be in a situation.
Oops, you're cutting out.
Would they then be subject to having to go into default to be able to be eligible for the rental arrears program? Like, is it just like the part of the system and the cycle, or there's no way for folks to catch up if like I'm just trying to paint a picture of what that would look like. I understand the systems and the silos, and I apologize, and and the caps and the limits, and I get that. I'm just trying to think of the very specific instances of folks who are being faced with rent increases, and then they have limitations and they can't will they be at risk of losing their vouchers?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I just want to establish that even though we have chosen to keep our voucher payment standards lower and not increase them, they're typically increased on December 1st of every year. We believe that the amount of subsidy that we're paying is still providing families affordable rent. And Liz can speak more specifically to that data point, or we can provide it to this committee if interested. But before, when we make changes to voucher payment standards, we look at what families are paying for rent, and the majority of the families receiving assistance are in fact paying 30% of their income for rent. Yes, there are cohorts of families that are paying up to 40, and there are some that are paying maybe even 50% of their income for rent. And this is a challenge. Again, housing choice. They can opt to, if they can't afford the rent, they can move to a more affordable apartment. However, we have a housing supply issue, so it's not as easy as that.
Yes.
No, Elizabeth had a question first.
I have a couple of disability related questions. One is, in the last couple of years, we've talked about the number of unhoused Vermonters who have physical disabilities and require accessible units. And the fact that they get to the end of the line for their vouchers and then they cannot use them within 6 months because those units actually don't exist. And we have talked about them then going back to the end of the line for vouchers. Is that no longer the case? Do they now just lose their vouchers altogether?
Well, currently, and for many months now, we have not been issuing vouchers.
Right, so do they, so.
But in normal circumstances, when our waiting lists are open,
Mhm.
actually, I'm gonna pause. I have a subject matter expert, if I may, Representative Mahali. Can I ask my colleague
Yes.
Elizabeth Bacon to respond to
You want to
that?
come up and tell us your name for the record, and there's a chair.
It's okay.
Yeah, it is.
I'm Elizabeth Bacon. I'm the Managing Director of the Housing Programs Administration Division at the Vermont State Housing Authority. So historically, in normal times, if someone receives a voucher and they're not able to find a place within the allotted time period, they would need to reapply.
Yeah.
And then they would go to the
There you
bottom
go.
list.
Yeah.
For about a year now, our waiting list has been closed and we haven't really been issuing vouchers. In the situation that for some reason someone were issued a voucher today, for example, and they couldn't use it, they wouldn't be able to reapply because our waiting list is closed.
Okay, so there's that. I just wanted to establish that, but my real actual question is what happens if there is a likelihood or a reality that SSDI gets cut? What happens?
In terms of participants' rent contribution?
Yeah, how will we as a state help keep people who've had their SSDI cut housed?
Well, what comes to mind is a proposal that we're working on, and not to get off the rails, but and it's a bridge rental assistance program that we're working on a final proposal to submit.
I just want to ask, so I want to clarify, and then we're going to go to you, is right now, the voucher's closed. If I have a voucher and I move or something, I move out or whatever, I've lost that voucher, right?
No, you can move with that voucher.
I can
You are-
move with the voucher.
You are a participant. If you're receiving the benefits of a voucher, you're considered a participant. And so you can continue to move from unit to unit with that voucher.
The exception, if I may, of a project-based voucher. So that's where we have a bit of a bottleneck right now. Generally speaking, if someone is in a project-based unit, after a year of successful tenancy, they can request to get a tenant-based voucher and move. We've had to pause all of that because of our funding constraints. So folks that are in project-based units are forced to stay there if they want to keep a subsidy until we have funds available.
Gail?
Sorry, I had my hand up before.
Oh, you did? I'm
I'm not
sorry.
sure
Okay.
with it.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, just because this is directly to this. Is the contingency fund going to be used for individuals holding vouchers or project-based vouchers? And the reason I ask that is that I thought some of your testimony initially was stating that at risk is also the development of more housing. Which also goes to the funneling and the shrinking, right? Because if there's not enough affordable housing available, then a person with an individual voucher who cannot find a spot, right? It just, everything is tighter and tighter and tighter. So I'm just asking whether you, are going to be looking at both of that so that we're not just the individual vouchers, but the project-based vouchers, so that we guarantee that projects that have been in the pipeline or have just sprouted up would suddenly look at, stoppages. Or if you have, how would you prioritize?
Right. This proposal is not an expansion of the program. This proposal is to prevent the termination and continued downward erosion of the Housing Choice Voucher Program for developments that are currently under construction, where public housing authorities have made an informal commitment to provide project-based vouchers. once that community is ready for occupancy, those commitments have been put on pause because funding is not available to support those commitments at this point in time. We've not ended the commitment. We've just told the developer, we're not going to be able to commit to you project-based vouchers until such time as we have money in our budget and I can certify that I'm able to support those units.
So that is my question. This would enable you to come back, to put those commitments back online? Back
It
online?
could, I think the devil's in the details.
It could.
It could.
Can I ask what the estimate, what the dollar amount would be or percentage of your portfolio of kind of on hold until it's built?
Sure. For the project-based voucher commitments, what comes to mind is approximately 21 units that are on pause, assuming, this is supposed to be $1,000 per unit per month. Who can do the quick math on that?
$250,000 a year.
Yeah, so that would be the percentage of funds that would be needed to those commitments.
Sorry, and so you know that dollar amount commitment per unit. Are these newer units not gonna be more expensive? Given that they're a brand new sparkling unit, it doesn't. So would you have to commit more dollars to meet?
They're gonna be asked to accept the rent standards that the program can pay.
Okay. Thank you.
Gail,
So if the rent where somebody is residing increases, and would they be eligible for that? If it's called rent arrears program, are those two separate things? What the HUD voucher would be, and if they were to fall behind, that's between the landlord and the rent, I think it's community action. So it would be totally separate to get them to catch up. I think it's 3 months. Or it was 3 months.
Right, they're separate programs. The rental arrears assistance fund is actually, this committee is going to be asked to reappropriate funds to that program this year. And that family who's receiving Section 8 assistance, who falls behind in their rent, could go to the rental arrears assistance fund to receive benefit to prevent eviction.
Okay.
Ashley,
Can I piggyback off of that? Because I've been trying to figure out this answer. Say this happens and for some reason rental arrears doesn't happen, or this person is now evicted, or
In the process.
something's not working.
Yes.
Do they lose their voucher? And if they lose their voucher, do they lose it forever? Do they fall to the like, if something happens, is there a way for them to, like your credit report, like build it back up? Like you don't lose it for, I don't want to say bad behavior, but.
Would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So if someone has a voucher and they're evicted for non-payment of rent, we would terminate their assistance
Forever.
for that moment. So folks have an opportunity to request an informal hearing, and so they could come in and say, I was in a horrible accident, so I couldn't pay my rent, and we'll take into account their circumstances.
Okay.
If there's disability related challenges, if there's domestic violence, we look at the whole picture and determine, should this person get their voucher back? And
Okay.
sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But if they don't, they would be eligible to get back on the waiting list if it were open.
Okay.
We would take that last tenancy into account if they came to the top of the list and we want to understand what happened, but it doesn't bar them forever from participating.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's.
yes, Gail.
But they go to the bottom of the list.
If our lists were open, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so like, and of course, the next question is how long and how hard is it to get back to being offered a voucher? How long does it take? Is it, how large is your family? How great your need? How likely that you live in a community where there is housing available? What's the logic of prioritizing, and where you fall on the list and then, so, yeah.
So housing authorities are allowed to create local preferences for their waiting list, so that varies by housing authority. Vermont State Housing Authority has a priority for Vermont residents. We have a priority for folks who are non-elderly disabled, so there's sort of a ranking point system that you get.
Okay.
And our highest priority recently has been folks that are needing a move up preference, so they're in a time limited rental assistance program like VRS. So this bumps those folks to the top of the list so that they can move from that program and allow other families to access VRS. So that most recently was our priority group. Since our waiting list is closed and we don't have funds to issue new vouchers, there's about 3,500 families just sitting, and we don't really know how long it will take before we'll have funds to be able to, issue new vouchers.
Just a very, very quick question.
There's still-
Is the list
Yes, I
frozen
know.
or is it wiped out?
It's just
Right now.
closed, it's
It's just
frozen.
closed.
You can't add to it, but we're not taking anybody off.
That's all I was
Is
wondering.
it all right with the committee if we proceed to our next three witnesses?
Agreed.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Well, our next witness, Joe Traiano, please come.
Any relationship to it?
Oh, Kevin was.
No, I don't know.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. Just tell us your name for the record and.
My name is Joanne Troiano, and I am the director of the Montpelier Housing Authority, which is the smallest and the last of the local public housing authorities. There are 8 in the state. We have also the smallest Section 8 voucher program. We have 125 vouchers. In addition, we operate a public housing program. We manage Section 8 new construction, sub rehab. We manage a couple of rural development properties and a couple of Washington County mental health properties for a total portfolio of 315 units. We have operated the Section 8 voucher program since 1976. And up until this year, we have never had a problem with the program. Our usage has been between 95 and 97% of our vouchers. With maybe one exception, we were 92%. Our waiting list, we were telling people up before June 1st that you'd be on the list no more than a year before you would get a voucher based on our attrition. And then started decreasing the amount of money we got, like everybody else, and told us that we would be in, but I'm sure it's been described to you, shortfall, that they weren't going to give us as much money as we needed. They would give us some additional shortfall funding if we agreed not to reissue vouchers when they expired, when someone left the program. And we couldn't move anybody to a higher cost unit. And I said, well, we have reserves. We have $180,000 in reserves. So can't we just say bye-bye? And she told me that if I didn't accept the shortfall program, we would be $100,000 in the hole by December. So of course, and my attrition is not even a unit a month usually. From June, from the minute that I got off the call with them until December 1st, we lost 11 vouchers.
Wow.
5 to deaths, 2 to tenants going to nursing home. 1 happily, a woman and her boyfriend built a house and she exited the program. So I am down now to 107 vouchers in use. So that means I have 18 households who could be helped that I can't help. Our housing authority right now is not in danger of terminating anyone. So I'm probably not going to be one of the 8 or 9 that has to come if you approve the $1 million. But the way that the program is going is just downward. I mean, it's just not fair. And especially since we were telling people 6-7 months ago that if you applied a year ago, if you applied, we'd have no more than a year's wait. And I was ready. I had next 5 people on our waiting list ready to issue vouchers when they told us we had the spot.
You got a question here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Please explain this to me like I am 5. I mean,
About 15.
yeah, 5.
Okay,
So you are telling me, I want to reiterate it for my own brain,
okay.
that HUD has told you that once somebody is no longer using that voucher,
I have to shelve. I'm calling it shelve it. They aren't taking them away from me. They're saying until there's a difference in, I don't know. I don't know if anybody's been told that they can do anything.
so you can't touch that.
No, they're sitting there. Sitting there on a little shelf in my office. That's the way I look at it.
But
It's not logical.
Could I just interject for
Yeah,
a moment? And so, once Housing and Urban Development has deemed that a public housing authority is in a shortfall situation, meaning they don't have enough funds to support their program costs, you are not allowed to issue vouchers. There's many things that you're not allowed to do until Housing and Urban Development reevaluates your public housing authority and says, you're no longer in shortfall, you can now commence normal business practices, issuing vouchers, et cetera. I was on a call yesterday with a high-ranking HUD official, and Liz and I both were, and he conveyed that until there's a full year appropriations bill, and we know for certain when our funding is going to be, if you were in a shortfall situation in 2025, then you were presumed to be in a shortfall situation in 2026, and that status will stay until your full year funding is known.
Right.
so not great. I'm mad. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to not freak out about this. And I'm not a math person, so please, I'm going to use very simple, literally, please, I am 5. Say I receive a voucher for $5 and I die. And you have to shelve it, but there is somebody else who needs a voucher. And they also need it for just $5. You would have continued my voucher had I not died.
Right. Absolutely.
But the voucher is shelved because I died.
And even though you're only 5, I'm also 5 in this situation, not understanding. We all got a letter, I think it was December 22nd, saying HUD is, I don't know if they used the word encouraging or advising housing authorities to stop issuing vouchers in 2026 until we know. I mean, the things that could happen, 2 weeks is the 31st of January. What's going to happen the 31st of January? Government might shut down again.
So,
and then you don't have anyone to talk to even, I mean, I'm getting up my nerve or anger level to call the shortfall person, because based on my history, I should have at least 116 vouchers under use if I hadn't had the large, it's the confluence of horrible things, a cut in funding and a much higher than normal level of attrition. And I would at least be able to issue enough vouchers to get back to where I was when they told us we couldn't issue any more vouchers.
and it's just this automatic cutoff, regardless of whether or not you have a reserve or not.
Right. In my case, as she said, the reserve wouldn't last all that long, and I don't know. I'm tempted to issue a few and see if they know this, but.
What happens if that happened? I'm serious, what would happen?
Well, I suppose I could terminate the program.
Well, what would happen is that should Housing and Urban Development have shortfall funds available as part of their 2026 appropriation, and Mrs. Triano did not follow the direction of HUD, and she was in shortfall, she wouldn't be able to lean on Housing and Urban Development or shortfall prevention funds. And I just want to also convey in the same conversation that we had with this HUD official, he did encourage public housing authorities to get creative. There are a lot of tools that are available to them, and that they need to get creative in figuring out those. I think this is one of those strategies.
Was that a person with whom you had worked in the past, or was that a new person?
This is an individual who leads a shortfall prevention team. So this is an individual that has been, he works with housing authorities across the country that are in a similar situation, and he, although wouldn't tell us the number, but assured us that there was at least one in every state that is going through similar.
And you hadn't been in shortfall before, so you hadn't worked with this person. But do you know how long they have been on the job?
How long have they been working for Housing and Urban Development? This individual has been working for HUD. He shared for 4 or 5 years. Prior to that, he was an executive director for more than 20 years. And in our conversation, he shared some of the challenges that his public housing authority went through during the time he was an executive director, and how the unit of local government was able to step in, help out by providing some administrative support, so that public housing authority could use all of their resources, which are eligible to support housing assistance payments. And when that housing authority does that, those funds that they use that are eligible get added to the base for next year's renewal.
We have 2 witnesses. One, I want to know, Kevin, let me just ask you, because we may have some simultaneous testimony here. Kevin, what's your time frame? Are you able to stay with us for a while, or you are?
I am.
And Chris, what's your time frame?
It's good.
Are there other questions for Joanne here at this point? Joanne, can you afford to stay with us?
I'll stay with you.
Yes.
It's more of a general question for everybody, because obviously my original question, like, we're very concerned about cash flow. But if you do come up with like something creative, please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do on our end to bolster that and support you. And I'm not a creative person. I can be a loud person, so just please let us know. And if you're in your testimonies, if you're like, hey, this is a wild idea, I'd like to hear it.
Great, thank you, Joanne. I'll tell you what, Kevin, you're next. I think I'm really appreciative of all the questions. I think it's our chance. It's been our chance to begin to learn a little bit how this complex program works. And and there may be, if the committee desires, we can arrange for even further testimony than we have today to get into it more. Of course, what we're focusing on today is whether or not we can support simply a letter to appropriations. Kevin, you want to identify yourself for the record and testify?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Loso. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Rutland Housing Authority and Housing Initiatives, Inc. We are a Rutland-based organization, and we have a very diverse portfolio, all of which is impacted by the issues around Section 8 currently. We have 154 units that were previously under the old public housing program. We have converted those under a program through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Project to project-based Section 8. We have 296 what I will call more traditional housing choice vouchers. We have currently 37 commitments in the area of the project-based voucher program, and we have a 78 unit development under what you might know as the LIHTC program, for lack of a better term. We have 8 units of transitional housing for the homeless. And we also have a very robust resident services program under the Support and Services at Home Initiative, or SASH, focusing on those 296 vouchers, which would be impacted on through this discussion. Of those 296 for which we are authorized by HUD, 57 of them are, as Ms. Toriano said, shelved. In other words, 57 of those vouchers, we do not have funding, HUD funding, to either issue or reissue. Historically, that number was around 20, and we were very proud of that. But within the last 12 to 18 months, we've had an additional 34 vouchers which have been returned, and we have been unable to reissue. So again, the gap between what we're authorized at 296 and what we get funded for has resulted in 57 vouchers essentially being taken off the street. Now, as Ms. Burke indicated earlier, we all have a per unit cost, if you will, for those vouchers, depending on local market factors, and what HUD calls the fair market rents for various regions around not just the state, but the country. So our per unit cost is somewhere around, it fluctuates, somewhere around $680 to $700 per participant per month. And I worked out a little scenario. Let's say that Rutland were to receive $1 million in state funding, or access to $1 million in state funding. Unlikely, but I'm using it for purposes of an example. We would be able to not only reissue the 57 vouchers that are shelved, but an additional 68 for a total of 125. Wishful thinking, I realize, but we have a 3-year wait list for our Section 8 program. We have closed the wait list because we feel as though accepting new applications is unfair, provides a sense of hope that just doesn't exist. But even with that, our backlog is 3 years of people who are currently on the wait list. We too are in a shortfall position. As Ms. Burke reported with Vermont State Housing Authority, we are working diligently to get out of that position. But again, the end result has been whenever a voucher is returned, we simply can't reissue it, thereby bringing our total costs down and hopefully getting us out of the red, if you will. I think Kathleen and Joanne have pretty well covered the impact and the benefits of this appropriation. It would increase funding for 2027, which would provide funds in 2026 for us to lease up more vouchers, thereby increasing our renewal funding and the number of families that we can serve in 2027. I know that Mr. Connolly will address this in his comments, but the Section 8 program has ripple effects as it relates to the rest of the affordable housing world. Most notably, those affordable housing developments that were and are dependent on project-based rental assistance are, in my mind, going to be stymied without both the project-based assistance that's provided, as well as the housing choice vouchers that are utilized in those properties. We, as I mentioned, have 37 of those what were housing choice vouchers, contracted with local nonprofits. And we have an additional 8 that are pending. And frankly, those 8 for a very, very great project in Rutland are on hold and frankly in jeopardy. And that's going to have a very real impact on the extent to which those developments can cash flow and sustain themselves in the way of revenue. Another area that impacts us directly is the extent to which Section 8 supports our efforts in our what we call Rutland Area Bridge Housing, which is designed to provide housing for people exiting homelessness. The concept is we bring a homeless family in, we help stabilize the family, and then we find them permanently affordable housing. Most of those successes in the past have been as a result of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. In other words, they move from transitional housing into an apartment out in the community because they have that Housing Choice Voucher subsidy to take with them. We're not seeing that in this property anymore because we can't issue new vouchers to support that transition. Additionally, the property itself is struggling because there's no medium-term rental assistance available. So the very future of that very strong and effective program is at risk. It's that ripple effect that I talked about earlier. I recognize the current situation in Montpelier is very, very, very difficult, and that the legislature is under enormous pressure with conflicting, not conflicting, but a lot of priorities to try to address. I'll go back to something that Kathleen said earlier, the concept of the Maslow's need hierarchy. You can't get too far up that pyramid without a roof over your head. And the reality is that with that roof over your head, you're able to pursue other options that ultimately lead to family self-sufficiency. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what the system is designed to do. But without that housing foundation, it really undermines the whole system. I will tell you that I've been in housing not quite as long as Kathleen, 26 years here at the Rutland Housing Authority. Prior to that, it was healthcare, specifically resident service coordination in affordable housing developments. It's never been this bad. We are on the precipice of losing housing for vulnerable Vermonters who need it the most. And again, I go back to my comment about, I know you're under enormous pressure, but the long-term cost benefit of this appropriation is going to have real impact on the families that we serve and the ones that you represent. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know our time is running short. So again, thank you so much. I apologize for not being able to get up there in person, but some of you may know I had a little mishap in my high rise, a fire that resulted in some water damage to 17, 18, 20 units. And we are working very hard to recover from that. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. And I'm available at any time to return to the committee and provide additional testimony.
Thank you, Kevin. What I think I'd like to do, if it's okay with the committee, is I'd like to have Chris Donnelly testify. And Kevin, if you would stay here, we could ask questions of either one of them before we get to the question of whether we could support this letter.
And I apologize for the background noise. It's the Vermont Food Bank dropping off food for our tenants.
We can't hear it. Okay.
I'm gonna go back on mute.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Hey, good morning. Chris Donnelly with the Champlain Housing Trust. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today. We'll be down tomorrow if people want to chat, but I know you have a kind of a time-sensitive decision to make today. I won't go through. I submitted a memo that I had provided to the Appropriations Committee Chair. So I won't go through that point by point, but just briefly, I just wanted to echo the support for this proposal because of the impact on our ability to deliver for what the state has asked us to do. More than half of CHT's renters rely on some kind of federal subsidy. That's about 1,350 residents or households. They may be working, they may be disabled, they may be newly exiting homelessness. And without this kind of stabilization of the public housing authorities that is envisioned with this contingency fund, we'll see a few different impacts in our shop. And it will be probably more significant here just because of our scale, but it will be similar to other community housing nonprofit groups around the state. If you recall, last week when my director, Michael Monti, was in, this was one of the points of priority for all the housing nonprofits in the state. This was fifth on his list, but not last. The impacts are threefold. Kevin just mentioned how without project-based commitments, and this was spoken to earlier, it is hard to move forward with development and move people out of homelessness. We have requirements when we receive funding to have a certain number of apartments set aside for people exiting homelessness. And without the commitment in place for the project-based vouchers, it's really hard to move forward. So it may stymie some of our real estate development. A second issue is that we operate programs such as, say, the VHIP program. We also operate motels and shelters. It is almost impossible to move anybody out of homelessness without a voucher. And last year, this committee supported changes to the VHIP program that would say, set a target at 30% of the units that were created through VHIP should serve people exiting homelessness. So we will not be able to reach that target, that request that this committee and the legislature made with that program. The shelters and motels it'll just be a bottleneck. We will continue to spend money on motels, and we'll continue to have to keep people in shelters without this is, the subsidies. The fact that these subsidies are being shelved means that we're taking away a lifeline to permanent housing for people. And that makes us unable to fulfill our mission and the requirements that the state has put as programs. And then lastly, with the number of people that are receiving federal support in our portfolio, any loss of income means that we will start to see stress in our property budgets. Stress in our property budgets due to lost rent means that we'll have stress in our operating budgets, and that just will cause this ripple effect to make it more difficult for us to be able to carry out other programs. Any destabilization of the housing authorities will have an effect on your community housing groups that are really working hard to serve the most vulnerable people and keep them off the streets and keep them out of hotels. You've heard that investment now will increase federal funding in the future. I think that's a beneficial use of this funds, but it'll also prevent increased spending on shelters and motels from state fiscal funds. And so it has a double benefit, not just in terms of stabilizing people's lives, but also I think on the state's budget and the capacity of nonprofits like ours to carry out our programs. So I encourage you to support this program. I really appreciate you taking so much time and to dive into it.
Questions of either of these two before we bring it back to us to discuss this letter?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to get in the queue for that.
Well, okay, we'll certainly have this discussion. Any questions for these two? I think it would be good if, I don't want to impose on you guys, but I think it would be good if you could stay with us while we discuss the letter in case questions arise. I just want to say the letter that's in front of you that was distributed I drafted, and then it was edited by Ashley, edited by Kathleen. And it's very simple in that I'm sure the people on the Appropriations Committee have plenty to read without a lot from me, or from us. But what it does is the first paragraph sets out essentially what it is that we're asking. The second paragraph summarizes the test, just who testified. And the third paragraph tries to explain the nexus between spending money now and how spending money now will increase the ability to issue vouchers this year, and in turn will have increased, since we'll have more active vouchers, increased funding for the future years. So I guess I would just like to put on the floor, if anyone's willing to make a motion, that we send this letter to appropriation. And then we'll discuss it.
So moved. Can I?
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all right. We have a motion on the
Before we
floor.
post the letter online.
It's online.
And Chair, I'm sorry, I just saw that these handouts were left on my desk, and I don't know whether you
don't know what these
meant to distribute these to the folks who get paper copies directly related. It's the memorandum from. Yeah, so if anybody who normally gets paper copies would like a paper copy of.
Okay, you need to go.
This is different.
I have to be somewhere at 12.
Okay. Well, can we do that?
I mean,
Anybody else?
What I-
Could hold copy till after, but.
No, what I can do, I think I have the authority.
Just leave it up.
Record her vote now.
I mean,
Mary,
not typically.
we're gonna take a vote. You were the clerk last session, you're still the clerk.
So we're
Is
not
this
having
necessary?
any discussion.
May I
No,
ask
we
a
should-
question?
no, we should have discussions. We have a problem that one person has to.
So
We need to have an official vote.
What?
No.
We don't have to have an official vote. We can have a sense of the committee. I can have a straw poll. Yeah. We can do that.
Like, can I register my straw?
Yes, you can do that. All
So,
right, but now let's have a discussion.
So if you have to leave, you don't get to discuss, or you can make a statement and then leave?
Yeah.
And give your straw poll.
Yes, I'd like not to do that as much as possible, so everybody else stick around. You're registering Elizabeth A in a vote in the affirmative?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, thoughts? Yes,
sure. Well, I won't be long because, we're already going up to the hour, but, and we heard the testimony from the folks who we really need to hear from, but as far as how I feel, I knew coming into this session, I haven't had one constituent say, I bet it's going, we knew we were gonna have a tough session. And this was one of the topics that I knew coming into the session would be front and center for our committee's work. And we're here very quickly with it. And as we heard from the testimony, I can't think of a place where money should be invested immediately more than here, because the cost of not making this investment is terrifying to me. And so as a policymaker and a person with a voice in this committee, I put my support behind the memo, and I thank every single person who is out there doing the work to help these folks. And so I will be supporting the memo and do everything I can to make sure that we don't continue to see a spiral.
yes.
Thank you, President. Can I ask a quick question? I'm so sorry, I had to step out briefly. We're talking about this specific memo
Right,
where it doesn't specifically create a fund.
that's correct.
So hypothetically, our recommendation
would be for appropriations, who is talking to James Duffy about what is the best way to streamline it.
Correct.
Okay.
I just
you.
don't think we know exactly yet what the best way for
I-
them to do it.
I just want to voice that I would be uncomfortable with our committee creating a new fund in the BAA at this time. Understanding that appropriations doesn't have that information quite yet. And so I'm fine with, moving forward with this language and saying appropriations will do the good work. I just want to make sure I
Other
understand.
comments, please. Joe?
Yeah, so as I read it, this is our intent with this, correct me if I'm wrong, would be to fulfill housing vouchers that there isn't currently money for.
It would be to slow the.
We have the vouchers.
Yeah, we have the
Have
vouchers,
money.
we don't have the money,
We
correct,
are just backfilling
right,
money.
correct.
They're saying.
One of the. We don't have the vouchers.
Yes. We have authority to issue vouchers,
Right.
yes, and we have vouchers that are in use, but this is not a proposal to backfill. That's what I was responding.
I don't know if backfill is the correct word, probably. This would be to put money behind the vouchers that you're able to.
Then the erosion, to stabilize those.
We're gonna stay here.
No.
So you're trying to stay at the same number of vouchers,
Retain.
the vouchers that you're using or the vouchers that you're able to?
Vouchers that we're using.
Permanent.
Section 8 decision.
Okay, so you're not, this isn't the,
This is to get us back up to 100%. This is going down further. And at this point, we would have no choice but to terminate people who are receiving assistance because we can't help them.
okay, so if part of our conversation was just around, thank you. Was around the possibility of projects on hold, which this wouldn't fund, in my opinion.
I think they have the power to allocate some of the vouchers, some of the money to project-based vouchers, and they would. I just don't know how,
Current
I don't think that we're not deciding as between what are they called, choice vouchers and project-based vouchers.
I'm just
I don't
thinking,
think we're deciding that. They could do either.
Was that your intent would be to fulfill project-based vouchers that are currently on hold? with
It
some of
would
this?
be our.
It's just not written that way, it's my point.
Right, yeah.
But it seems to
It
be,
may be helpful to also understand that it's one singular program. It's the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Project-based vouchers are simply a component of the,
Yeah.
but it's all one intent.
Other comments? Yes.
I think that this is one of those, like, we can look at this as a statewide solution that is that will allow the people that know best, we're not overstepping, we're not creating hurdles. We're ensuring that the people who know exactly where the risks are will be able to retain people in really vulnerable situations who are already facing increased, dramatic costs in their other, survival, health and food and et cetera, transportation. Given all of that, if we can help lay a little bit of cement into that foundational value of being permanently housed or having stable housing, that this is a hugely important, crucial element of that cement ingredient. So
Thank you.
I will be voting yes.
I only want to have one comment here, which is what attracted me about this particular proposal is the following. I do think, and Joe kind of alluded to this, we're going to have a continuing problem here, which is only likely to get orders of magnitude worse.
Mhm.
And I don't know what we're gonna do. In other words, are we gonna mount up an entire state program to substitute the loss of the federal program? And if so, how in the Lord's name are we gonna pay for it? These are important issues that we're gonna have to face next year, if not before, but certainly in the near future if the current trend continues. What attracted me about this particular proposal is that its future effect, that it has a continuing effect, one-time future effect of putting us in a better position, whatever paltry funding we get from the feds, to maximize that. So that's what particularly appeals to me. It does not relieve us. It will not serve to relieve us from the pain of future decisions. So I guess at this point, I would ask for a show of hands.
Wait, real quick.
Yes.
Sadia, I see that you just turned your camera on. Do you want to say something?
Thank you. Yes, which is, it's not really much other than my 2 cents, just to echo that the importance of this. And it really is to mitigate, to do anything that we can in our power to mitigate future loss of funding or vouchers, and to try to stabilize the situation and in the best capacity we can, given our current housing situation. I support the statement, and hopefully, we can appropriate the funds. So I just wanted to just say that this is of the utmost importance, and I think that this is on the right track. And it is not up to us to decide. We're leaving it to the experts. So I think.
Thanks, Ed.
Right.
Thank you. Yes, Mary.
Oh, I thought the experts.
Thank you.
They are, yeah.
I just want to concur with everything that Representative Dodge said. Housing is a crisis and has been a crisis for a very long time. And to have people who are in crisis looking for housing is just heart-wrenching. To see kids, without a home. It shouldn't be that way. In the richest country in the world, we shouldn't have that. So I totally support this, and anything else that I could do. And I definitely am so impressed with everyone who has spoken today. And I, as Representative Lamont said, leave it up to the experts, because you know what's going on. So thank you so much for testifying. I appreciate it.
So could I have a show of hands for people who feel we should send this letter? And
Elizabeth.
With one caveat,
yes, what's that?
putting money,
3, 4, 5, 6.
this is 5 million.
Elizabeth.
9, 10. Okay, yes.
And I'm hopeful that this does what we're hoping.
Which doesn't what?
That it does what we're hoping. Or we see years and years and years of benefit. I'm skeptical of that it's going to be like 2 to 3 years by the time the numbers just ratchet themselves back down. And I see that 5 million and I look at I don't know what we're up to, 78 million out of the general fund that comes out for education because of structural problems. I hope we don't just keep throwing money at structural problems.
I think I share a lot of Joe's concerns personally, and I think what we need to do is have a report back on what's happening. And I will be in touch with Kathleen, who in turn will be in touch with the rest of you on how we make that happen. And we'll find out what, Tiff, would you convey that the letter sometime later today will go from us to the committee? Thank you. And at this point, I really want to thank our witnesses.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Ms. Troiano, Kevin Loso, Chris Donnelly, 1,000 thank yous. And we are adjourned for the morning, and we have after lunch, is there anything besides there's city discussion at 1:00? Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.